Welcome to the deep dive. Whenever you look at the supply chain, whether you are tracking a specialized freight shipment for your business or just waiting for a retail delivery, it is incredibly easy to view the entire process as this perfectly automated system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It looks totally seamless from the outside.
Right. You see the tracking updates, the logistics software, the routing algorithms. But if you peel back the layers of that system, every single transaction depends entirely on a human workforce.
Yes, a very real, very stressed human workforce.
Exactly. And according to the stack of sources we are analyzing today, that workforce is currently undergoing a massive, multi-billion-dollar identity crisis.
The contrast is honestly stark. You have this super sophisticated software managing the freight on one hand, and then this completely fractured reality of the labor market actually moving it.
Yeah, it really makes you realize the industry is standing on very precarious footing. So today, our mission is to unpack a really comprehensive stack of 2025 and 2026 industry reports, market analyses, and insider data focused entirely on the future of truck driver recruitment and retention strategies.
Which is a huge topic right now.
It is. I mean, we are looking at a sector responsible for moving the entire physical economy, and it is currently facing a labor market imbalance that is just fundamentally reshaping how operations function.
Okay, let's unpack this. How does an industry this essential end up with such a severe supply and demand disconnect in its labor force?
Well, to really grasp the mechanics of this disconnect, we need to look at the specific context of the 2026 freight market.
Right.
So the prolonged post-pandemic collapse in truckload pricing has, it's finally leveled off. Demand remains somewhat soft, but it has stabilized.
Which means carriers can actually forecast their budgets again.
Exactly. They have a baseline now. And as a result, a significant majority of fleets are actively trying to execute expansion plans.
They want to grow. They do. But the complication is that, simultaneously, nearly half of all active drivers are currently exploring new job opportunities.
Half. That is wild.
Yeah, it's massive turnover. You have fleets eager to grow colliding with a workforce that is highly transient right now. Because of this, recruitment has totally evolved. It is no longer just a standard human resources function. It has turned into this highly specialized, heavily tech-driven ecosystem.
And the numbers detailing that recruitment friction in these reports are just, well, they're completely counterintuitive.
Yeah, totally.
Because going into this material, you might assume that if half the workforce is looking for new jobs, recruiters would just be swimming in easy hires,
Well,
right?
it's like you'd think it's an employer's market.
But that assumption is entirely false. We are dealing with a phenomenon the reports identify as the quality-quantity paradox.
That is a great name for it.
It really is. Recruiters at major carriers are receiving massive floods of applications, but they are reporting a brutal ratio. They are only finding one suitable hire for every 100 applications received.
And, think about the administrative burden of that ratio. It is immense.
Just staggering.
Recruiting teams are essentially running vast processing centers at this point. They are dedicating huge amounts of labor hours to sift through and systematically reject 99 applications just to locate that one viable candidate.
Yeah, and there is a quote in our sources from Greta Kristeva. She's the recruiting manager at Crisco Transportation Group, and it captures the reality on the ground perfectly.
Oh, I love that quote.
Yeah, she states, "The problem has never been finding drivers. The problem has always been finding qualified candidates."
Which is such a crucial distinction.
It reminds me of being on a dating app where you have 100 matches, but 99 of them don't even have a driver's license.
That is actually a very accurate analogy.
But I have to push back on this narrative for a second. Are the industry screening standards just artificially high, or is the available talent pool genuinely that diluted?
What's fascinating here is that carriers have virtually no control over those standards.
Really? None.
Very little. The barrier to entry isn't dictated by picky hiring managers. It is mandated by a combination of intense insurance underwriting algorithms and severe regulatory scrutiny.
Ah, the insurance companies, of course.
Right. When a trucking company uses the term qualified, they aren't merely asking if the applicant holds a commercial license.
They need more than that.
Much more. They are looking for a candidate with a highly verifiable employment history, an impeccably clean record cleared by the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and a demonstrated work history totally devoid of chronic job hopping.
Right, because frequent job hopping indicates a higher risk profile for the insurance providers, I would assume.
Precisely. Predictive modeling used by insurance underwriters shows that drivers who bounce between companies every few months are, statistically speaking, far more likely to be involved in accidents.
Because they don't know the trucks.
Exactly. They lack familiarity with the specific fleet's equipment and safety culture. If a carrier attempts to hire a candidate with a spotty safety record or a highly fragmented resume, the insurance providers will step in.
What do they do? Deny coverage.
They will either refuse to cover that individual completely, or they'll elevate the fleet's premiums so drastically that it completely erases the profit margin on the truck.
Wow. So finding that one statistically safe, insurable candidate out of 100 is just the initial hurdle.
Yeah, that is just step one.
But if we dig into the demographics of who those applicants actually are, the data reveals a massive collision of generations happening inside the cab.
It's a huge demographic shift.
The sources indicate the average truck driver right now is 47 years old, and the rate of driver retirements is accelerating sharply.
Right. The American Transportation Research Institute data we were reviewing points out that the industry is hemorrhaging its most experienced, predictable demographic at an unsustainable pace.
And the demographic stepping up to fill those vacant seats is Gen Z, who are entering the labor market with radically different expectations.
Radically different.
The World Economic Forum data in our stack shows that 89% of Gen Z workers demand a sense of purpose in their employment, and 55% of them actively use artificial intelligence to problem solve in their daily workflows.
Which is a huge pivot for an industry built on very traditional manual labor models.
Definitely. Furthermore, their retention isn't solely tied to base compensation anymore. The retention failures carriers are experiencing stem from equipment reliability, the demand for predictable scheduling, and consistency in their assigned miles.
They want stability, not just a paycheck.
Exactly. These younger drivers increasingly want local, predictable routes rather than spending 3 uninterrupted weeks on the road. But this creates a conceptual gap for me. How does a recruiter realistically market purpose and AI integration to a Gen Z applicant applying for an over-the-road trucking position?
Well, bridging that gap requires trucking companies to fundamentally dismantle their traditional operational models.
Meaning what, exactly?
Carriers can no longer market themselves purely on per-mile pay rates. They must evolve into what the industry terms destination employers.
Destination employers, I like that.
Yeah. To attract a Gen Z candidate, a carrier has to provide a holistic value proposition. That means investing in late-model, highly reliable equipment so the driver isn't stranded in maintenance bays.
Because nobody wants to sit around not getting paid while their truck is broken.
Exactly. It also means utilizing technology to ensure highly responsive dispatch communication. And most importantly, it means architecting clear, transparent paths for internal career progression.
Okay, I understand career progression in like a corporate office, but how does a carrier structure internal growth for a driver whose primary function is just operating a vehicle?
The ERB group is actually highlighted in the sources as a prime model for this structural shift.
Oh, right, the Canadian carrier.
Yes. They compete successfully for talent across North America by institutionalizing flexible transfers and internal growth pathways. So a new driver might start in a long-haul over-the-road role, but the company outlines a specific, achievable trajectory.
So there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. As that driver's life circumstances change, maybe they start a family, they have a clear mechanism to transition into a dedicated local route, or they could even move out of the cab entirely into a dispatching or fleet management role.
That makes total sense. By offering that structured longevity, the carrier provides the sense of purpose and stability that younger demographics prioritize.
Exactly. It shows they're valued long-term.
But fulfilling those generational demands while simultaneously paying a recruiting department to process 100 applications just to find one qualified, insurable driver, I mean, that consumes an incredible amount of time.
A massive amount of time.
And in the freight sector, time translates directly into burned capital. Let's explore the financial mechanics outlined in these reports, because the true cost of making a single hire is staggering.
The financial burden is immense, particularly when we analyze traditional driver recruitment agency models.
Yeah, if we break down the most common approach, we see the percentage of salary model.
Right, which is the industry standard for a lot of these agencies.
Under this structure, recruitment agencies charge between 15 and 25% of the driver's first-year salary as a placement fee.
Which is deep.
It is. So if a fleet is hiring a driver at a $70,000 annual salary, They are paying upwards of $17,500 in placement fees alone. That is a massive capital outlay just to get a physical person into the seat of the truck.
And the crazy part is, attempting to bypass those agencies to save capital doesn't entirely solve the problem.
Right. The DIY approach isn't exactly free.
No, not at all. If a carrier opts for an internal direct hire strategy, the hidden costs still accumulate to anywhere between $5,000 and $8,000 per driver.
Because internal hiring requires the fleet to absorb the loaded cost of the recruiter's hourly wages, the marketing spend on job boards, the non-revenue generating orientation pay, and then all the mandatory compliance checks.
The compliance checks are where it really starts to add up.
Yeah, let's look at the mechanics of those compliance fees. You have Department of Transportation drug screens, which run $50 to $100. You have motor vehicle reports to verify driving history, costing $30 to $50. And then you have the FMCSA clearinghouse query.
Now, the clearinghouse query is a fascinating component because it only costs a fleet $1.25 to execute.
$1.25. That really stood out to me. $1.25 seems negligible, but the mechanics behind it are critical.
Highly critical.
Because that query taps into a federal database to check if a driver has previous drug or alcohol violations they might be trying to hide by, switching states.
Right, trying to outrun their record.
Exactly. Even though it costs next to nothing, failing to run that specific query is a catastrophic compliance failure.
Missing that $1.25 check leaves a carrier entirely exposed to negligent entrustment lawsuits if that driver is later involved in an accident.
The liability would be off the charts.
Oh, the audit risk alone can essentially dismantle a company.
Here's where it gets really interesting. All of those expenses, the $17,000 agency premium or the $8,000 internal burden, they do not represent the largest financial threat to a fleet.
Not even close.
Right. The most critical financial metric identified in our sources is something called the empty truck tax.
Yes, the silent killer of trucking fleets.
This measures the daily lost revenue of a truck sitting idle in a yard simply because there is no one legally qualified to drive it.
The empty truck tax is the underlying economic force that dictates the entire strategy of the recruitment market.
How bad is it per day?
An unseated truck costs a carrier between $800 and $1,500 every single day in ungenerated revenue and fixed asset depreciation.
So let's run that math. If a truck sits vacant in a lot for just 3 weeks while a fleet's HR department struggles to find that 1 in 100 candidate, that vacancy adds an invisible $16,800 to $31,500 to the true cost of that eventual hire.
Which is just devastating to a carrier's bottom line.
Looking at those numbers, I have to challenge the logic of the market here. If an empty truck is bleeding up to $31,000 over 3 weeks, wouldn't a fleet operator be economically irrational not to pay an external agency $15,000 if that agency guarantees they can fill the seat tomorrow?
Well, you've isolated the exact economic justification that sustains the premium agency sector.
Okay, so they know exactly what they're doing with those fees.
Oh, absolutely. This is why traditional full-service firms, organizations like Transforce or ATG Recruiting, maintain such dominance. They're not simply selling talent. They are selling speed and risk mitigation.
That makes perfect sense.
Fleet operators calculate the daily burn rate of the empty truck tax and recognize that paying a $15,000 premium fee is mathematically superior to letting the asset sit idle.
Plus, they get some kind of warranty on the driver, right?
Exactly. Furthermore, these agencies secure those high margins by attaching 60 to 90-day guarantee periods. If a placed driver quits within 3 months, the agency replaces them at no cost. They basically act as an insurance policy against turnover.
Okay, that economic model works for the massive enterprise fleets equipped to absorb substantial cash flow hits up front. But dropping 15 grand in a single day is completely unsustainable for smaller fleets or owner-operators trying to scale.
Oh, it would put them out of business immediately.
Right. And that intense financial pressure has fractured the recruitment market, driving radical innovation and introducing entirely new models over the past 2 years.
The industry is seeing a profound bifurcation right now.
Meaning splitting into 2 distinct paths.
Yes. Technology and alternative business structures are evolving, specifically to service the segment of the market that is functionally priced out of traditional agency partnerships.
And the sources detail several of these next-gen models. First, we have the emergence of flat fee services. Oh, trucking is cited as a prime example. They charge a flat rate of only $500 per placement.
Which is a massive drop from 15,000.
Incredible drop. They achieve this drastic price reduction by completely stripping out traditional recruiter overhead and instead leveraging existing dispatch networks to source candidates.
It is a very lean operation.
It operates very much like the ultra-budget airline of recruiting. You achieve the core objective of filling the seat, but you forego all the premium guarantees and risk mitigation.
Right. That budget approach solves one end of the spectrum, while artificial intelligence tackles the other.
Yes, we are seeing the rise of dedicated AI-powered platforms, specifically companies like Lane AI and the Spotter AI Sentinel system.
These are really fascinating tools.
They aren't just passive job boards. They are utilizing conversational SMS bots to engage candidates instantly.
Which is crucial because truck drivers are constantly mobile.
Exactly. They cannot fill out complex web forms while driving, so the AI texts them, parses their qualifications, and executes automated document verification in real time, shrinking the screening process from days down to literally hours.
And beyond AI, the sources also highlight a peer-to-peer revolution happening.
Right. Platforms like Drivers First. They utilize a model where current drivers act as road recruiters and refer their peers directly.
The mechanics of the peer-to-peer model are incredibly effective because they rely on inherent social accountability.
Like, you aren't going to refer your buddy if he's a terrible driver.
Exactly. A currently employed driver is highly unlikely to recommend someone with a terrible safety record or a poor work ethic because the failure of that referral directly damages the referring driver's own reputation with dispatch and management.
It makes him look bad.
Right. That built-in social friction organically filters out the unqualified applicants, resulting in significantly higher retention rates during the critical first 90 days of employment.
The reports synthesize all these options into a strategic matrix based on fleet size, which honestly gives a great blueprint for how this is playing out.
It's very structured now.
Yeah. If a carrier operates 1 to 10 trucks, they almost exclusively rely on those $500 flat fee services and peer referrals to survive. Fleets with 11 to 50 trucks employ a hybrid approach, perhaps maintaining a part-time internal recruiter while utilizing on-demand placement tech.
And the big guys.
Finally, fleets with 50 or more trucks maintain full-time internal teams but lean on traditional agencies for surge support. But looking at the budget end of that spectrum, does utilizing a $500 flat fee model imply a fleet is sacrificing the rigorous FMCSA compliance screening we discussed earlier?
That is the inherent risk of the budget models, honestly, and it explains why the market is specialized so distinctly.
So you get what you pay for.
Pretty much. While smaller fleets migrate toward flat-fee platforms out of sheer capital necessity, premium staffing organizations like PTS or Premium Transport Staffing, they continue to thrive precisely because their core product is guaranteed regulatory adherence.
They handle the headache.
They do. They provide highly structured, heavily audited screening processes. When a carrier pays an agency premium, they aren't merely buying a driver's labor. They're buying a shield against future compliance audits.
Because relying on a budget tech platform assumes the regulatory rules are uniform across the board. But the moment a truck crosses a border, that automated software hits a wall of fragmented regional laws.
Oh, cross-border compliance is a nightmare.
The sources heavily emphasize these cross-border complexities, specifically within the Canadian market.
Right. The North American Freight Network operates as a deeply integrated physical system, but the regulatory oversight is aggressively fragmented.
So an agency in the U.S. operates totally differently than one up north.
Yes. Agencies operating in Canada, such as Trucker Canada and Drake Canada, they must maneuver through an entirely different legal architecture.
The sources outline how Canadian carriers are bound by strict provincial requirements. For instance, operators in Ontario must maintain a CVOR, a Commercial Vehicle Operator's Registration.
Which is incredibly strict.
Yeah, it acts as a comprehensive safety report card, tracking every collision and conviction tied to the fleet. Meanwhile, operators in Quebec must adhere to the NSC, or National Safety Code, which enforces rigorous standards on vehicle maintenance and driver hours of service.
But the most striking compliance issue the reports highlight is something called the Driver Inc. warning.
Yes. The sources note that Kriska Transportation Group instantly places drivers who even inquire about Driver Inc. on a permanent do not hire list. What exactly is the mechanic behind that arrangement that makes it so toxic?
Well, Driver Inc. is essentially a misclassification tax scheme.
Sounds sketchy.
It is. Under this arrangement, employee drivers claim to be independent incorporated businesses. By doing so, they attempt to bypass standard payroll taxes, workers' compensation premiums, and statutory benefits.
Even though they don't actually own the truck they are driving.
Exactly. They are functionally operating as standard employees of the carrier, but claiming contractor status.
So it's a loophole to inflate take-home pay by dodging federal and provincial tax systems.
Exactly. But the liability for that loophole falls squarely on the carrier.
The carrier takes the hit.
Yes. If the national revenue agencies audit the fleet, the carrier is hit with catastrophic back tax penalties and fines for misclassification. That is why companies like Crisca treat the mere mention of it as an instant disqualification.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the severity of these provincial codes and tax liabilities illustrates why modern recruitment vendors are pivoting their entire market positioning.
They have to be experts in this stuff.
They do. They no longer sell themselves as headhunters. They actively market themselves as partners in safety and compliance. Whether they use AI algorithms or human recruiters, these vendors have to prove to fleet operators that their systems are mathematically foolproof against compliance failures.
Because the consequences of a single audit can easily bankrupt a mid-sized carrier.
Overnight, essentially.
Which brings us to the ultimate, somewhat paradoxical conclusion of our entire analysis. We've dissected the $17,000 agency premiums, the AI text bots, the fragmented provincial compliance systems, and the staggering math of the empty truck tax.
We've covered a lot of ground.
But yet, every single source in our stack points to one undeniable truth about the future of recruitment.
And it's so simple?
It is. The most effective recruitment strategy available is retention.
Yes.
The absolute cheapest driver a fleet can hire is the one who never decides to leave.
The underlying economics validate that completely. Yeah. Industry analysts refer to this dynamic as the turnover tax.
Let's explain the turnover tax.
Sure. If a carrier spends $5,000 to directly hire a driver, and that driver quits after a single month because the routing was chaotic or the equipment broke down, the effective cost to staff that single seat just doubled to $10,000.
Ouch.
Re-recruiting for the same cab over and over systematically drains a carrier's operational capital.
The math provided in the reports crystallizes this perfectly. If a 50-truck fleet can implement internal growth paths and improve dispatch communication enough to reduce its annual turnover from 90% down to 50%, that carrier saves up to $280,000 a year purely in direct hiring costs.
That is a massive sum of money.
And that figure doesn't even factor in the capital saved by avoiding the empty truck tax. So what does this all mean? It means that investing capital to keep an existing worker satisfied by providing reliable equipment, predictable home time, and a tangible sense of purpose is vastly more economical than deploying a sophisticated network of artificial intelligence and premium agencies to constantly replace them.
This raises an important question regarding the long-term viability of the sector. The trucking industry must fundamentally alter its internal culture to survive the coming decade.
They have to change their ways.
They do. Carriers can no longer treat their workforce as an endlessly renewable resource to be burned through and replaced. They must transition their operational framework from a transactional per-mile mindset to a deeply relational mindset that values longevity.
It is a complete paradigm shift, forcing an industry built on constant motion to figure out how to make its people stay put.
It is a massive shift.
Yeah.
And, there is a final subtle layer to this puzzle hidden within the sources that points toward a really fascinating future.
Oh, what is that?
Well, we noted earlier the data showing Gen Z entering the workforce, fully expecting to utilize AI to solve problems.
Right.
Concurrently, broader industry forecasts for the 2030s map out the gradual deployment of autonomous trucking.
Self-driving trucks.
Exactly. Which will ultimately shift the traditional role of a driver into a remote pilot position. You'll have individuals overseeing multiple autonomous trucks from high-tech control centers.
Kind of operating heavy freight almost identically to how remote drone pilots operate today.
Exactly that dynamic.
Yeah.
So here is the provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
If the incoming generation of workers demands AI in their daily workflow, and the inevitable future of freight requires highly technical, remote operators interacting with complex software, are these new AI-driven recruitment platforms serving an unstated dual purpose?
Wait, you mean like a filter?
Yes. By forcing applicants to interact with conversational AI bots, digital document verification, and automated compliance systems just to secure a job today, are these tech platforms quietly filtering the talent pool.
Oh,
They might actually be building the exact database of tech-savvy operators that carriers will desperately need to staff the autonomous control rooms of the 2030s.
that is incredible to consider. The friction of the recruitment tools being used today is inadvertently acting as a screening mechanism, training and isolating the exact workforce required for an entirely different job that won't fully exist for another decade.
The industry is actively preparing the foundation for its own technological evolution, even while it battles the day-to-day labor shortages of the present.
That dynamic is certainly something to keep in mind the next time you track a package moving across the country. Behind that digital map on your screen is an incredibly dense ecosystem of generational shifts, AI algorithms, empty truck penalties, and massive financial machinery, all working frantically to find that one perfectly qualified individual out of 100 to keep the physical economy from grinding to a halt. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep looking past the surface and keep questioning how the invisible systems around you actually function.